Most people do qualitative analysis wrong. And the reason why I say that is because they think it's just talking to a bunch of people. And in a way, that's pretty much what it is. You're doing a ton of interviews, whether that's single interviews or it's a group interview, or perhaps you're doing a group home study, right? Ethnography. And sometimes you can even do qualitative analysis on online social media comments and posts and things of that nature. And that gets into the field of even doing a social media audit. So all of these things are great in terms of doing qualitative research, and sometimes qualitative can speak more than quantitative, right? But what is the usual paths that people go down when it comes to qualitative? What I find is that people generally listen to stories or interviews and transcripts that are typically the most emotional. And in research, we typically kind of shy away from that. Those are what we call outliers, people who have extreme reactions to certain products, services, or even kind of what they expect out of a company. And that's not to say that these outliers are not something to look out for or take into account. We certainly do, and that's why we perform certain statistical calculations. But to take an outlier and assume that it applies to every person is kind of wrong. And even in quantitative, we have what's known as different survey takers. There's typically those who might answer one only, or those who, just go through the test really quick, or perhaps there's those who answer an extreme only, or there's those who answer neutral only. There's all of these different types of nuances that are really, really cool with quantitative. But if we think about it in the realms of qualitative as well, we can also see the same thing. And so one example of that is if you're doing focus groups, right? Typically you might have 3 to 8 people in a focus group, and sometimes you will have a main speaker, whether that's due to personality, being an introvert, extrovert, just being a born yapper. But that person can overshadow the whole group and their opinions. The whole point is to be able to get multiple opinions and also avoid group thinking. And group thinking is when people agree to something just because it's the group consensus. That's part of the social pressure, and it's something that we have to take into account when it comes to qualitative research. Another thing to watch out for, like I said, are those outliers of those who are a lot more emotional, a lot more talkative. We also want to hear from people who are a lot more quieter because perhaps they're dealing with different problems, right? Even though you're dealing with the same product, not every problem that is presented to a customer is the same because, could be from a number of reasons. But another thing to look out for is don't just look at the words that people are saying. Of course, you want a transcript when it comes to your qualitative research, but that's kind of basic, right? Anyone can do that, and we can always pull quotes and put it on a presentation, and voila, look at that. I would have a six-figure job income if that's all qualitative took. But that's not where we stop. What we actually do is something really similar to quantitative analysis as well. And when it comes to data analysis, I always said in other videos, we're not just reporting the news of what percent of survey takers did X and Y or prefer X and Y over, another product, company, or service. Instead, we're looking at the reason behind why they are answering this. And so it applies the same principle to qualitative as well. And the whole point of qualitative is, of course, to ask questions that are hard to answer in a survey, and we understand why and sometimes how, but we can also synthesize it, infer kind of why customers are answering that way, why they're saying something, perhaps why this problem is such an issue for them, and all these things. And sometimes we can even do follow-up interviews, right, and ask about that. Another mistake that I see is people just don't ask the qualitative participants their survey questions, and you can actually do that, right? And there's different ways you can do this, either through asking the same survey or even asking similar themes of questions, and coding the qualitative data into quantitative. There's all these fascinating ideas that we can take, even from taking the transcript and doing a natural language processing analysis of that, right? And so there's just so many directions we can take it, but also so many pitfalls that can exist if we're not careful when it comes to doing qualitative analysis. always remember that you want to ask what, so what, and now what. What are you trying to say? What does it tell us? Now, what should we do because of that information? When you're able to articulate clear findings and insights like this to leaders, but also to your manager and also to yourself by simplifying it, you're able to have a much more clear direction wherever you're trying to go with a project, product, or recommendation. If this simple video helps you with analysis, give me a follow and subscribe. If not, comment, or if you have any questions, leave it down below. Peace.